Good morning. So today I want to talk about myth, right? Because myth is often used by skeptics and critics, right? As if it's some kind of myth is often weaponized, right? Unfortunately, it shouldn't be because I believe, in my experience, myth is often grossly misunderstood. Often, what I've seen from a lot of people is that people equate myth with fiction. It's not. I mean, if myth was fiction, we would just call it fiction. Right. Myth simply means that I've added an element of the supernatural, to put it simply. Okay. So when I tell you, like the very first mentor I ever had, I met this individual back in 2007, and they were a mentor of mine for a solid 4 years. Right. I believe that my meeting this man was a divine appointment. Right. Because I remember before I knew him for a couple months before he actually mentored me. And during that 2 months, like we had, obviously we got to know each other, and we had a few lunches together, and we had some conversations, and things like that. And even when after he became my mentor, I noticed that very quickly I just was very honest with him, right? In fact, in a way that I'd never been with anyone else. I was very open, and I just trusted this man like out of the gate, right? Which I know at first glance might seem reckless. It worked out, right? I'm still friends with him today. I was very vulnerable with this man, right? And, I could go on and on about that. I believe that I responded that way because it was a divine appointment, right? Now, everything I told you was true, right? I mean, I had a mentor, for 4 years. I met them, et cetera, et cetera. The moment that I say that I believe it was a divine appointment, I've now added an element of myth to it. But the story is still true. And that's what I think a lot of people miss. And I admit, I missed that too for many years until I dug into it. So, again, myth does not mean fiction, right? I mean, there can be mythical elements in a variety of, it can be a part of fiction, but it can also be a part of nonfiction. Myth, when people try to weaponize myth, it's, unfortunately, and people on the other side of that coin, unfortunately, when myth is weaponized, it can become very sharp. And it actually can be used very successful against Christians and believers. That's why I'm making this video, to help people understand that, there's no reason, when people say the Bible's full of myth, like my response would be today, yeah, you're right, it is. I'll admit that. The Bible absolutely is full of myth, right? That doesn't mean the stories are untrue. See? Right? The moment we start talking about God or any kind of supernatural, we've added an element of myth. Myth is not a bad thing. Right? Again, myth does not equal fiction. The Bible is full of myth. That's okay. Right? That's not a problem. So, when you go to the Old Testament, it talks about all the different battles that Israel faced, and obviously, they talk about how they believe God intervened or God did this and helped them win this battle or that battle. Well, the moment they start talking about God, they've added that element of myth. But the story of the battle is still true, right? The story is still grounded in reality. So, yes, reality and myth can coexist, right? Myth does not mean a fable. Myth does not mean a fairy tale, per se. Myth can absolutely be grounded in nonfiction, right? Myth can be grounded in very, you can have myth and reason in the same story. So, that's something I learned along the way, and it was very helpful when I learned that, and I hope it helps someone else. Take care.